folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today's tutorial came about from an email I got a few days ago, and it was asking me how I make my templates for my quilling. I've used them a bunch of times in my videos. I've been making them for years on my websites, and this person just wanted to know how I made them. Did I use programs on the computer? What did I do? So I figured I would go step by step and show you a few different ways that I make my quilling templates. I have a bunch of different supplies here that I'm going to be using today. I have a bunch of different notebooks that I use, ongoing ideas, old ideas, things I come back to, stuff like that. It's always where I start. I always use a good pencil and a strong eraser. Scissors come in handy. I'm going to be using those later. And I use tracing paper in my templates. If you're not familiar with tracing paper, it's a real thin, it's kind of opaque. You can see through it a bit. It's similar to wax paper in that you can see through it, but it doesn't have that same kind of slick surface that wax paper does. I also use these fine tip Sharpie markers pretty often. And then if I'm planning on making more of a permanent template or something I'm going to post on my website, I do use plain white paper later on. Like I said earlier, I always start in a notebook. I have a bunch of different notebooks going. This one happens to be a pretty old one. A lot of my very first designs are in here. I just find it easier just to keep things all together, all my ideas, in a sketchbook and start from there. And another thing that I personally do is I like to work on scale. Everything you can see in here more or less is the same size. This started back when I was selling a lot on Etsy. It was easier to keep supplies on hand if I knew that everything I was doing was always going to be more or less the same size. All my mat boards were the same size, all my frames were the same size. Just working in one size, especially if you're starting off, might be something to think about. So there you can see there's an apple, there is a melon slice, a bar of soap. So I would start off with that outline, that box there. That was the dimensions I wanted to keep my image inside. And if you followed me for some time, you might have realized I like very simple ideas, just basic shapes of things. I like fruit and vegetables an awful lot. That's a big inspiration point for me. I like plants, not so much flowers, but just simple objects. Pencil, really basic things. So I start off in the same size and then I draw a basic outline of things and then I go from there. I don't usually fill up my templates with the scrolls and the coils and what's actually going to fill them in later. I just like the outlines. So I'm going to use this pear for example. So once I have my basic shape, I take a piece of tracing paper and I trace my basic sketch. Now again, if you are just interested in making a template, you don't have to do either of these steps. You can just take a piece of paper, draw your template, and go to town. This is not necessary. I do this because I like all of my templates to be in one place in a notebook. It's just the way I work, but this is how I do it. So I have my notebook full of ideas. I decide which one I'm going to do that day, and I trace that with a pencil with the tracing paper on top. So I'm just going on the outside here of the basic lines, and if I was doing this for a project in real life, I would be going a little bit slower than what I'm doing right now. I'm kind of just flying through this because I didn't want to make this tutorial super duper long. But just so you get the basic idea, there's the outline of the pear, and then there's a little bit of what's going to end up being the peel. It's kind of going to end up being like a three-dimensional pear. And then there's a stem, and then there's a little bit of a leaf. And then that's all I need to do for that. Once I have my template traced on my tracing paper, I just have to cut it to a workable size for my cork board and then just put that on there. I should have taken this wax paper off first, sorry about that. But I put it on the board first and then I cover that with wax paper and pin everything in place. And even though, tracing paper is pretty thin and you can see through it. When it's on the workboard, you can still see it just fine. So I don't feel the need to worry about working off of that tracing paper. I can still see my design perfectly fine, and then I work right on there just like it's any other printed template. And that really is how I work. This is from a basket of tracing paper templates that I have on my workspace. Some of them have some basic notes on them. If they're things I've redone a bunch of times to sell, they'll have some basic measurements so I don't have to go back and look up or try to remeasure something every time I do it. But I really don't add a lot of detail when I'm working onto my my templates. Now, let's say you have a notebook full of drawings and you want to make them onto something other than tracing paper. You still do need tracing paper, but you can make it so that it's easy to get it off of there onto a, let's say, that white piece of, it's just printer paper. So what you're going to do after you trace your drawing onto tracing paper, you're going to flip it over onto the back, and using a pencil is very important, you're going to cover it with just scribble, just like I'm doing here, just all the way top to bottom. Try to get every part of it with just some kind of scribble. And then what you're going to be able to do is transfer that image onto your white paper. So you're going to flip it back over so the right side's up, what you originally traced on. Take your pencil again and go over the original sketch, that outline that you already traced the first time. You're going to go right back over it a second time with a pencil. When you remove the tracing paper, a really faint outline will appear on your white paper. Because you drew over that scribble, it transferred where you were drawing on the scribble onto your white paper. And then you can make it a little bit darker. You can use a pencil for this if you want to, but if you want to make it so that it doesn't smudge or move around, you can go ahead and trace it with more of a permanent marker. And then if there's any marks that aren't exactly where you drew your permanent marker, you can always use that eraser and erase any stray marks. This is now a fully finished template that you can cut down for size for your workboard and get to quilling. And let's say you want more of a digital version of your template, or you just wanted to make it a little bit cleaner. You can scan it if you have a printer scanner, or if you have an app for your smartphone. There's ones that will let you scan as well. So what I do is I scan it with my phone and I upload it to the Procreate app on my iPad. Then I can trace right over that with my Apple Pencil and then I can go back and just make the lines a little bit more straight and just a little bit more professional looking. I just want to say I'm not an expert on the iPad or Procreate. I just got this one after saving up for a while for it, and I've been following a lot of tutorials on YouTube. So if you have any questions about Procreate or how to draw on iPad, I would go there. But again, this is just another way that you can draw templates for your quilling, and just wanted to show every other possibility. So after I upload it and I trace, I can manipulate the lines. I can erase the first sketch. So this is what I actually traced. It looks a little wonky. There's definitely some things that need to be fixed, but I was kind of rushing a bit. I can erase pretty easily. I can go back and change the lines and just make them look a little bit smoother and a little bit more professional. I am planning on doing this pair sometime in the future, so when I actually give you a template for that one, I promise it will look a bit nicer than this one. So let's pretend that I'm actually happy with this template and this is the one I want to make printable. I can then go up and export it and save it as a PDF, which is how you would see it on my website, ready for you, available to be printed. I know this was a lot of information about templates, and I did give you, like I said, a few ways to go about making them. So if you have any questions, don't forget to leave those down below and I will answer them as soon as I possibly can. And in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.